Hello and welcome to another beautiful day down the allotment. My name's Nick and today we're going to be looking at harvesting some tomatoes. So let's get started. So I've got absolutely tons of varieties of tomatoes down at the allotment, and I just think that it makes an absolutely beautiful accomplishment where you have tons of different types of tomatoes. And to be honest, considering I actually genuinely thought that I lost all my tomatoes. At one point, I've done so well on the old tomato front down at the allotment, and I'm getting absolute heaps now. I'm getting to the point where I'm like, do I need any more jars of tomato sauce? Which is very exciting. I try pretty much every year since I've had a garden. We've grown all of our own tomato sauce, which is beautiful. In the winter, we eat a lot of like bolognese, lasagna, chilies and things like that. Not so much in the summer, but in the winter, spring and autumn, we do eat quite a few, like maybe 1 or 2 meals a week. So we do really need some tomato sauce. Now, saying that, I've got to the point now, I've got this tomato sauce actually, boiling away on the hob because you need to reduce the amount of water that is, especially if you use heirloom varieties. And I've just put away 12 jars of tomato sauce that I've sterilised in my pressure canner, which is so exciting because I genuinely thought this year it was completely hopeless, and I genuinely thought to myself that there was no sort of way that I'd be able to have tomatoes. So it's so impressive that like life will out and all that stuff. I do still have blight, and what I'm doing is I'm pulling any tomatoes that have blight or have signs of blight, and I'm just getting rid of those. But those that are good, I'm picking, and what I do is I triple check them when I take them home. I wash them and all of that sort of stuff, and I make sure there's no sign of blight on them, and then I basically boil them up and store them in canning jars, which is very exciting, I know. These tomato sauce I'm just going to be doing as tomatoes because I have so many of them. I did chuck in some chilies, but really it's just going to be a really plain tomato sauce, hardly any other vegetables, on the basis that I kind of just want to get these tomatoes in jars and I don't want to use any other room for it, but I am going to reduce it quite significantly because there's so much liquid that comes out of tomatoes, and because tomatoes are a high acid food, you can actually just water bath them, which is quite exciting. I use a little bit of lemon juice because all tomatoes have different acidity levels, so I just go ahead and do that, and I'm really excited about the tomatoes that we're able to produce this year. Now, saying that, there are some tips and tricks for growing and harvesting tomatoes in blight season. So, for example, you can't simply just pick tomatoes like you would in a very dry season. You want to pick all of the tomatoes that are like a good size, even if they're green, if the blight is particularly bad or starting to turn. So if you do that, you can actually ripen them off the vine, which won't give you as a nice tomato, but it still would be what we call vine ripened, okay? Because as soon as they start to blush, they are technically vine ripened tomatoes. But you must use your tomatoes really quickly. So within a week of being picked, there's a good chance that they'll just rot because of the blight. So what I try to do is, as quickly as possible, I try to store them. So like I said, I've used a lot of these large tomatoes as a tomato sauce. I really like heirloom variety sauces. I think they just taste far nicer. So all the mix of flavours I really enjoy. Whereas most of these cherry tomatoes, I'm not going to lie to you, we had a load of cherry tomatoes for dinner, but also we were able to take these cherry tomatoes and dry them, and I grind them up, and they make an absolute fantastic tomato puree, which is really easy to store because it's a powder, and we use that throughout the year, and we just grind it up it's an old coffee grinder, but like a herb grinder or anything like that would work just the same. And we just don't want to store them for too long because obviously we know that we have quite a significant blight problem over the allotment. Funny enough though, I'm also growing tomatoes at home. I don't have that issue here at home. There's not very much blight, so I'm making sure also that I'm not coming from the allotment and going straight into my garden at home, because if I did that, if I did that, then I would probably spread blight to my home garden as well. So it's really important that you are, in the back of your mind, not transferring blight across. Now, most of these plants do have blight, and quite a few of them are quite resilient to the blight, which I'm really happy about. And I genuinely thought it was going to come through like a wrecking ball. I think it does help that I'm growing them vertically, and it does help that I've done some pruning. I've given them the extra space for circulation. I'm removing any blighted material and destroying it. I think that all helps. Blight doesn't actually stay in the ground. It as soon as the plant rots and the plant is completely dead, the blight dies off, because it has to be on a live material so that it's able to overwinter for the next year. Now, saying that, I'm not too sure if I'll do rotation next year. I've planted tomatoes in the same place for 2 years. Now, does that mean that that's the reason that I got blight? No, I don't believe so. Blight is airborne, so as soon as blight comes in the air, you will get blight, okay? So it isn't something that we worry about. However, if you can reduce the amount of soil that splashes up onto your plants during heavy rain or watering, it does significantly help. So maybe next year I'll concentrate on mulching around my tomato plants. Maybe that'll help. But it is mainly the wind that transports the tomatoes. And I have to say, looking down the allotment, because when you drive in, you kind of like have a little nosy about all of the allotments. And I have to say that quite a significant amount of people have had to cut their tomatoes down to the ground. I did do that with a couple of mine, but I am so happy that I didn't have to do it with all of them, which is really, really good. I'm hoping that if I continue producing this many tomatoes, then I'll have enough for not only my tomato sauce, tomato puree, and other bits. I did a lot of salsa last year, so I don't have to worry about salsa this year, I have to say. But it is really good that I don't have to worry. I will be pulling up this black plastic, giving it a nice clean, and putting down a load of horse manure over the winter season, which will really help with the blight as well, because with no dig, you're continuously bringing in new material. Therefore, you don't have to worry about a load of sick or illness in the soil. It's like you're rotating the crops. And to be honest, when you don't have that big of an area, rotating the crops doesn't make that much of a difference, because if the pests are in the area, they know that just one bed away is not particularly very far for them to travel. That's why when you get an allotment, you get the first year as like a grace period, because the pests don't know you're there, especially if you haven't had very much growing in that allotment like I did. I think mine hadn't been cultivated for about 4 years. So the first year of my allotment, the birds didn't even know I was growing. It was great. And now I have to net everything because they absolutely adore my crops. So it is one of those things that you do kind of have to adapt. And every garden space is so different. So even if like you live incredibly close to me, I'm in zone 9A here in Essex, just down the road is completely different to the conditions that I grow in. I know that because obviously I've got my garden at home, and my garden at home is so like orders of magnitude easier to grow in, because I don't have the issue with birds, probably because my garden is so close to my house, and because of my dog. My dog does not like pigeons. So, which is funny because he lives with ducks, right? So he's fun with the ducks, but he absolutely hates pigeons. So I don't have any issues with the pigeons eating my crops. However, in my back garden, I have no issue with sparrows eating any of my beetroot. But in the front garden, I can barely grow beetroot because of the sparrows. Over the allotment, beetroots don't have any issues. So you can see that basically from space to space, there is significantly different. And I think that was the biggest thing that I found when getting an allotment, apart from like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with all this space? I found it quite interesting and a little bit of an eye-opener, seeing that all of these plants will behave so differently just up the road, because it's about 2 miles away from my house, about 10 minutes in the car. So it is quite surprising. I absolutely love it down the allotment. I think it is so interesting being able to grow all of these beautiful plants, and I'm always so ever so grateful at the end of a season. I feel completely humbled. Was this the season we expected? No, probably not. But is this still a great season that we've learned so much from? I think so. And to be honest, as the season goes in, I have read quite a lot, because I'm on quite a lot of gardening forums, and quite a lot of people have said that they reckon that September's going to be a warm year. So what do you think? Do you think September's going to be particularly warm? Should we be cutting down our tomatoes? Should we be writing off our squashes? I'm hoping not, because I really feel hopeful for my winter squashes, and I do have about 2 butternut squash, and I'm hoping perhaps I could have a couple more before the season's out. That would be really exciting. I'm now, as it's going into fall, I'm kind of looking forward to, squash soup and things like that, because I just adore that. It's a really fantastic thing to take into work. But it looks like I might be having tomato soup at work, which is always an absolute wonderful bonus of the season, isn't it? So let me know down below, what do you do with your tomatoes if you get a complete glut? Are you doing well with your tomatoes this year? I'm hoping so. Or are you completely utterly battling blight as I am? And I'm so impressed that we have so many tomatoes considering the blight. But blight is something that we do have every single year. It just depends on when you get the blight. You either get it super early, like we did this year, or like last year, we got it around about October time, which is honestly the better way of getting blight, in my humble opinion. However, it is one of those things that you're just not going to be able to rectify or refrain from getting. Now, I have read quite a few things about how to get rid of blight or prevent it. Now, I told you before that I've used aspirin on my plants to prevent blight. So you spray that on the plant, and apparently it prevents them from getting a significant infection of blight, which would be super exciting if it works, obviously. Now, you can also get blight resistant strands of tomatoes. I think it's Gardener's Delight or Crimson Crush, I cannot remember, is a variety that is very resistant to blight, which is super exciting. And apparently, if you add a heaping spoonful of baking soda, a teaspoon of vegetable oil, and a mild soap, it's like a small amount of the mild soap into a gallon of water, and you spray your tomatoes with this solution, you're actually able to prevent blight. Now, I've never tried this, so does it work? I'm not sure. But apparently it is a good way of preventing blight in your tomatoes and your potatoes. So that would be really exciting if you know. Is there any remedies that you've tried at home that you would like to share? Please leave them down below. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. And if you haven't done already, please consider subscribing. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.